Let's talk about networking in Docker. When we run our application with Docker Compose will automatically create a network and add our containers on that network. So these containers can talk to each other. Let's see this in action. So I'm going to bring up the application one more time in the detached mode. Good. Now look at the first line. Creating network with the default. So we can run Docker network ls. Here we can see all the networks on this machine. I think every Docker installation has 3 networks: bridge, host, and none. Honestly, I'm not sure what these networks are for, but what matters here is that we have a network called Vidly default. The driver for this network is bridge on Linux or NAT on Windows. Now, this network contains 3 hosts or 3 containers: web, API, and DB. So these hosts or these containers can talk to each other using their name. Let's see this in action. So back to the terminal, let's look at the running containers. So we have Mongo, web, and API. Now we're going to start a shell session on the web container and ping the API container. Take a look. So we're going to execute in the interactive mode. The container ID is 8CS6, and we're going to run shell. So let's ping API. We get a permission error because we have logged in with the app user that comes from our Docker file, remember? So we have logged in with the app user, and this user doesn't have ping permission. So let's exit. I'm going to bring up the last command. Now here we have to use an extra option for setting the user. We're going to log in as the root user. Good. Now look at the shell prompt. We have a pound sign, which means we have the highest privileges. So here we can ping API. Now look, we're getting responses from a machine with this IP address. Now on your machine, this IP might be different. Now let's press Ctrl and C to get out of this. So this is what happens under the hood. Docker comes with an embedded DNS server that contains the name and IP of these containers. Now inside each container, we have a component called the DNS resolver. This DNS resolver talks to the DNS server to find the IP address of the target container. So when we ping the API container, this DNS resolver asks the server what is the IP address of the API machine or API container. The DNS server returns the IP address, and then the web container can directly talk to the API container using its IP address. So each container has an IP address and is part of a network. Let me show you one more thing. So back to the terminal. Here we can run ifconfig to see the IP address of this container. Take a look. So this container has 2 network adapters. One of them is Ethernet 0, and over here, you can see the IP address of this container. So 172.21.0.2 is the IP address of the web container. Now back to our compose file. Earlier when we defined the API service, we added an environment variable that contains a database connection string. In this connection string, we have DB, which is the name of a host. That is the DB host or the DB container. You saw that our API container can talk to this container because both these containers or all containers in this application are part of the same network. Now, one thing I want you to understand here is that this host is only available inside the Docker environment. So if I open up my browser and go to localhost/DB, I'm not going to get anything. So the API container can directly talk to the DB container. But if you want to access this container, we need port mappings. And that is why we have this port mapping over here. So this port on the host is mapped to this port on the container. So if you open up MongoDB Compass, which is a popular MongoDB client, we can establish a connection to localhost port 27017 because this port is mapped to our container. Let's verify this real quick. So connect. Great. So here we can see all our databases. Here's our Vidly database, and in this database, we have a collection called movies with 4 documents. So here are the movies that we currently have in the database. So this is all about Docker networking. Next, we're going to talk about viewing logs.